Governor, welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Morning, Lewa, and morning to all your participants, wherever they may be.
Governor, we're going to start today by starting with you. Many people know you as one of PNG's most vocal political figures, but few know about your journey before politics. You came from the private sector with experience in the mining industry, and that background gives you a very rare insight into what real delivery and accountability looks like. Can you share a bit about who you are, what brought you into politics, and how your professional experience has shaped your leadership style?
Well, it's quite simple, really. I guess even as a student in university, I always wanted change, and I didn't like it when things weren't working to a standard that I felt we deserved. You know what I mean? As a people. So I think my first major protest as a student, one of the protests I led was against Serabi Namaliu when he was PM. And look, we later became really good friends, and he's someone I admire. But that was around the time when the first ugly head of corruption began to creep in. So further afield, when I started working for Octedi Mining Limited, even though I ended up in middle management, I was a student activist, union activist, pushing for better conditions for Papua New Guinean workers. So I've always had in me this desire for, I guess, social justice, social equity, giving everyone a fair go. And I think my longest employment, well, now in another year it'll be my longest employment being a member of parliament, I was at Octedi, and under being trained by BHP, getting cultured with all of the BHP values, and that's just filtered through to sort of things like maximizing your resources, getting better value, being honest and transparent. All these came from BHP. I mean, BHP, what they call a global leadership development program, and I was very fortunate to be one of those Papua New Guineans. I think there were about 20 of us. Wow. That were identified and put through the program. I ended up working in mining, all kinds of mining operations all over the world, and that gave me the grounding and sort of developed my views as to how things should work, and I've just brought that into politics. And the motivation for going into politics was that I was still at Octedi in 1993. My grandfather died. And even though I was born in Wewak and spent maybe a couple of my early years in my village, due to the economic hardship at the time, my mom moved myself and my sister to Medang. So I grew up in the settlements of Medang.
Wow.
And, so I hardly went back home to the village, but I was always really close to my grandfather. My grandfather originally adopted me as his son when I was like maybe 4 or 5 years old. So I was always very close to him. And when he passed away, I made it a point to go home to bury him. I arrived about 2 days after he was buried because the roads were so bad. When I finally got to the village and sort of met my cousins and all the other relatives and met their kids, and I suddenly realized the very privileged life I had as someone working in the mining sector. I mean, obviously, the best paid workers in this country are in the mining sector. And I just felt guilty looking at how my relatives were living in the village with no money. And one of the other peculiar things was that my closest cousin, he's passed away since, and guess what? He died from diabetes of all things.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's, the improved lifestyle, it's actually killing a lot of my relatives now. But at the time, I said to him, I was like, Henry, why are you guys doing all these holdups on the highway? Because my village was very, very popular for holdups, armed holdups and stealing. It was quite embarrassing, with my background coming home to find out that, well, my people are essential criminals, And he said something that essentially changed my entire outlook on life. He said, we have a lot of food, but when your nieces and nephews want soft drinks or they want a bicycle or twisties, he says, I don't have any cash to buy that stuff for my kids. Yeah. So the only way I can make money is, to hold up the trucks running on the highway and get money that way. So that had a profound effect on me. I thought, I'm educated enough to help these people. So that's when I started looking at cash crops and things like that. And, I sacrificed all my breaks from the mine. So every time I had a holiday, I'd fly to home. And I sort of broke up my holidays around my work, and I'd spend about a week at home and started developing cash crops. Coming out of school, I was the top agriculture student in my class, even though I
Not
didn't
surprised.
take it up. I was also the top economic student in my class, even though I didn't take that
Wow.
up.
Wow.
I think number one in the
Very
country or
impressive,
something at the
Governor.
time. But anyway, I was ducks of school. Well, coming from the environment I came from, you had to work hard to sort of get ahead of everybody else, and I think that's what I did naturally. And so I thought, I might as well use all these things that I know to come back and help my people. And the internet was just beginning to open up in Papua New Guinea around that time. So I had access to the internet. I was one of few Papua New Guineans with access, thanks to Octeri Mining Limited. So I spent a lot of time doing research on the internet, even though it was really slow. So I learned a lot, and I began to apply that in the village. So by about 1999, I quit my job after 8 years. Went home and started training people in cash cropping, agriculture, vanilla, cocoa, all these things, just trying to help. So I went from village to village, and I turned it into a business. Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
So that's it.
I didn't even know that
That's
about
how it
you.
all
That's
started.
amazing. I'm very impressed. I didn't know that at all. So, and I'm sure many others are finding that out for the first time today. Very, very impressive and inspiring for all of us, really. So 50 years is a big milestone age. However, 50 years after independence, many citizens in Papua New Guinea feel that we've fallen behind in basic services and, of course, national progress. What do you believe has gone wrong, and what foundational changes are needed now to rebuild trust and momentum? Governor, what is your reflection on Papua New Guinea's progress or lack of it?
I think the biggest failure, in my view, is that we did not change. What I mean is that, see, the biggest challenge for any organization is to manage change. And I think in PNG government, we just haven't changed. We've been doing things the same way for a very long time, and we're still doing it the same way. And so as a result, the world has passed us by. And so people are beginning to see the impact of that now. They're beginning to see it, in our communities, and people are frustrated. Many of them don't understand why we are in the situation we're in. So there's things like, we're not using money properly. We're not getting value for money. There's a lot of corruption, and in our weak systems and with things falling apart. There's an opportunity for corruption. You have weak systems, and that's proliferated to the point where it is, corruption actually wears you down over time as an organization. You don't see the impact straight away, especially in a large organization, but over time, as that negative impact is sustained, it then leads to all of this breakdown that we're seeing now. So the impact we're seeing now is actually the result of corruption perhaps in the last 15, 20 years. It's now filtered through. Because corruption has the effect of you know how they say you got to bite the bullet. Well,
Yeah.
we didn't bite the bullet because the impacts didn't hit us at the beginning. We're kind of like that proverbial frog that's been put in the water that's slowly been brought up to boil. Well, that's Papua New Guinea. So, and we're only seeing it now because it's been building for a while, and certainly in the last 15 years, I think it's really worse. Like, anything left to its own devices will actually multiply and become bigger. And so corruption has actually multiplied and become bigger. And so it's affecting all Papua New Guineans now. At some point, it would have been just affecting the companies that were involved. We've seen a lot of big companies close down and leave. But that's a result of corruption, So, and it's being perpetuated by a lot of people in power and their friends who are in the private sector. So it's a collusion of a fairly tight cartel of people, and that's why Papua New Guineans are feeling disillusioned and marginalized. That's what it is.
Yeah, exactly. I feel a lot of people really feel helpless in a situation like this, and you're almost left to wonder what's actually happening,
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's why a lot of people are kind of looking to members of parliament like myself, Kramer, Lino, Hagahuno, Kua, Idahu, Nomane, because we're the ones that are seeing the impact of all of that, and we're speaking up against it. And I think that's something that's resonating very well with Papua New Guineans at the moment, given what's actually happening.
Well, that brings me to corruption, what I wanted to talk about, corruption and accountability, because corruption remains one of Papua New Guinea's biggest challenges. What concrete actions are in place or should be prioritized to restore transparency and accountability in the government institutions? I wanted to go into that before I break it down a little further.
To me, to fight corruption, you need to improve checks and balances, number one, and you need to improve accountability. And you need to strengthen the institutions that give you that. Right. For example, for the last however many number of years, the executive government has become extremely powerful. So the prime minister, and I said this, I think 20 years ago, and I said the Papua New Guinean prime minister is a democratically elected dictator. So we've been electing dictators all this time. And a lot of people will probably say, oh, look, he's being dramatic. But my own experience has been that the prime minister controls the executive government. He also controls the government on the floor. He also controls parliament on the floor. The prime minister then, he gets to appoint the chief justice. He gets to appoint the police commissioner. He gets to appoint the defense force commander. So essentially, that's a dictator. There is no independent system that does all of this, you know? So there's no check and balance. Like, if the prime minister appointed you to a job, you become beholden to the prime minister, right? And you're loyal to the prime minister. You're not loyal to the country. You're loyal to the man. So that's the biggest thing we've got to fix is our checks and balances. Parliament needs to hold the executive government accountable. That's how democracies work, right? Well, in Papua New Guinea, it hasn't been working, and it hasn't been working for a long time. So that's number one. Number two, you've got to separate the functions so that you can, oversight them better. Like, for example, right now, a lot of money is given to national government departments to do what we call implementation. Yeah? So they do implementation work, and then they go and audit themselves. Now, a principle of business is that you can't audit yourself. What needs to happen is that a higher authority gives direction and it gives funding to a lower authority to go and do the implementation. This higher authority then comes back and audits the lower authority. You don't audit yourself, but that's what's existed in PNG in the system for, look, ever since all of us can remember. You might recall I started proposing a lot about doing what we call a hard reset.
Yes, yes. You've mentioned it multiple times in Parliament, yes.
And I've also mentioned about changing our intergovernment funding system so that we move to a block grant model. So when we move to a block grant model, that frees up the executive government to do more of this auditing work, these checks and balances that I am talking about, so that someone becomes responsible for checks and balances. Someone else is responsible for implementation. So the audit work. So you strengthen things like Auditor General. You strengthen things like Fraud Squad. You strengthen things like the Ombudsman Commission. You don't weaken those mechanisms, which they're all weakened at the moment. And they're weakened because, you see, the Prime Minister determines who gets funding for what. Now, if the Prime Minister decides to cut funding to the Auditor General's office, he decides to cut funding to the Fraud Squad, he decides to cut funding to the Ombudsman Commission, all of a sudden, he's weakening those institutions. But we don't see it because Papua New Guineans don't see the budget books. And they don't understand that systematically, this one man who is in charge of determining Papua New Guinea's future is deliberately weakening the systems that are supposed to make everything else work. You see, if you did a hard reset and you moved to a block grant model, the national government would strengthen what we call audits and inspections. At the moment, there are 0 audits and inspections. I've been a governor now for 7 years, going on 8 years. In these 7 years, not one single national agency has come, even though I've invited them many times, to come to my province and audit my province. They've never done it. They've never audited any other province. They've never audited any. So everyone's just been operating basically without any audits. Now, in private sector, we do audits 6 monthly, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Papua New Guinea hasn't done a single audit, I think, in the last 50 years. There's never been an audit.
Wow.
Exactly. So we're not, and I'm not just talking about financial audits, I'm talking about performance audits. You got to go in and audit the performance of the organization. Other countries do it. Papua New Guinea doesn't. So you're not measuring us against anything. It's just
There's
arbitrary.
no benchmarks.
There's no benchmark. There's no benchmark. Full stop. So this is why I call it a tucker box management. Huh? We run like a tucker box.
Goodness.
That's the problem.
Yeah, I have an accounting background, so I'm blown away
Okay,
by
there
that,
you go. You
that
understand what I'm talking
realization.
about.
Yeah, I'm a chartered accountant, so yeah, it blows my mind that not even a monthly audit. Okay.
0. Look, I had to ask the Australian government to come in and audit my provincial government, and I think that happened about 3 years ago. So in that time, I think the only agency of government in Papua New Guinea that's had a performance audit is the Sepik provincial government because I requested it. There you go. And the Australian government had to come and do it for us.
Wow. Well, again, it's a representation of your leadership. So looks like you guys are the only organized ones then.
Well, look, if I keep telling my public servants, look, you're not doing this right, you're not doing that right, at some point they're going to be like, he's just a politician, what's he talking about? So I bring in experts from outside, and they come in and they tell them, the public servants will sit up and listen. They're like, oh, okay, So, and because it's an independent third party, you see, like you understand that as a chartered accountant, sometimes you would recommend to a company to get an independent third party to come in and do an assessment. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Because you can't audit yourself.
No, there's a massive conflict of interest there. So
Exactly.
wow, that blows my mind. Okay.
Well, you apply to a country, and you can understand why we're in these problems that we're in.
Correct. And that's magnitude is huge when you're talking about the country, let alone a organization, right? Like a corporation.
If we were a company, we would have been, insolvent long ago.
Yeah.
But we're a country. See what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. So representation in Parliament, Governor, I watch Parliament religiously thanks to my husband, and rarely do I hear MPs say, I went back to my district and this is what my people told me. In fact, I'd like to give you credit because I have heard you say it. Why is there so little reference to direct consultation with the people who elected our leaders?
Well, my view is, sadly, in Papua New Guinea, once a member of parliament gets elected, the people no longer have any influence on what that member does. He basically has license to do whatever he wants for the next 5 years. And so the member comes to the conclusion, and it's a prevailing, how shall I say, it's a prevailing thing in prevailing school of thought in amongst our members of parliament, that the people in the villages and byways and highways, they need projects. So give them projects, build them a school, build them a road, build them a bridge, build them this, that, and the other thing. Just keep building them stuff because that's what they need. What we forget is that it is the quality of the services that come out of those buildings that is what people need. And village people don't necessarily understand that that's what they need. So it comes back to the whole benchmarking standards, stuff that you and I just discussed not so long ago.
Cabinet selection reform. Ministries today are handed out to ministers based on coalition building, not competence. Shouldn't our cabinet be selected based on skill, expertise, and the ability to deliver?
Yes, absolutely. If you have a confident prime minister, I think he gets to pick competent ministers. I mean, we saw that with Somare. The reason why that government did so well was because, you look at the lineup, they had some incredible people in strategic ministries. In a lot of ways, when Peter O'Neill came on board, he had a lot of really good ministers as well. And suddenly we moved to James Marape, and the situation changes dramatically. Marape values loyalty over competence. So that's his yardstick. And this is the thing. It comes back to the point I made earlier. A Papua New Guinean prime minister is a democratically elected dictator.
Right.
So he gets to do whatever he wants. We rise and fall based on the decisions that prime minister takes. And you can never underestimate how much power the prime minister has. Like, for instance, sitting in cabinet, even though he says, look, we vote on cabinet decisions. That's not true. Everybody votes on what the prime minister wants. And that's the practice.
Wow.
It is the practice. Regardless of whatever cosmetic facade you may set up to try to sort of, it's like putting lipstick on a pig. It's still a pig.
Yeah, right. It's still a pig. Exactly.
Exactly. So that's what's happening. It's just a show. But in reality, the prime minister is 200% in charge of what happens in the country. He decides the budget framework, for example. If he decides that, members of parliament get an extra 10 million kina each every year, because that's his way of maintaining support, then all the ministers have to sort of line up and comply and make that happen. It's a little bit more than that. I think if you get a smart prime minister, a prime minister who envisions a future and uses our resources wisely, figures out how to get performance from all of the different players that constitute the government machinery, you're going to get performance.
Right.
We're not getting performance because I personally think, we've kind of lost the ball in the sorts of areas that we should be sort of directed towards. Other countries focus on the economy. That's because their voters require that the members of parliament at least have a working knowledge of the economy.
Right.
In Papua New Guinea, I would say maybe 5 members of parliament, maximum maybe 10, understand or have a working knowledge of the economy and economics in general. The rest don't.
Wow.
So if you don't understand the importance of the economy to managing and running your country, to how it affects your politics, then that becomes your main problem. Now, if the Prime Minister himself does not understand economics, you suddenly multiply the problem by 100%. And that's the problem. At least under what's his name? Under
O'Neill.
Peter O'Neill, you had 2 people that understood the economy well: the Treasurer, Charlie Abel, and of course the Prime Minister himself. In the previous government, you had Patrick Broyd
Yes.
managing the economy.
Yes.
And Patrick is an economist.
Right.
So we've sort of gone from there to where we are now. I mean, look, no disrespect to Ian Lingstaki. He's a brilliant mathematician, okay? And he's a really good businessman. And I'm sure he has a good working knowledge of the economy. However, I don't think he has the wherewithal to argue his case against the Prime Minister. He just does what the Prime Minister tells him to do, because the Prime Minister is extremely powerful. You need a Prime Minister that understands the economy so that he can allow the players that make the economy work to do their job.
Right.
That's the problem.
Right. Well, spot on. That was sort of along my train of thought. Well, fantastic. Thank you for confirming that. Westminster-style democracies like Australia, the UK, if a minister or MP were found by the courts to have credible evidence linking them to corruption, they would be expected to step down, if only to preserve public trust. Governor, what would happen here? And if that were you, what would you do?
If it was me, I'd quit like same day. Mostly because I hold myself accountable to Western standards,
Right.
not to whatever PNG standards may be. Look, I'm a corporate executive. If I left this job tomorrow, I'd go back to the private sector and I'd be running a board or running a very big multi-billion kina company. It's important for me to maintain my integrity and to preserve my integrity. So that's just me. I can't speak for everyone
Absolutely.
else. But you've seen, you're Papua New Guinean, you've seen over the years that our members of parliament, they don't resign. That's not the thing. I think, except for Sir Julius. I think Sir Julius did that. He stepped down graciously at one point. Sir Michael did that. Sir Michael stepped down graciously at one point, sort of to clear his name. But I think beyond that, no one else does it. I mean, it's unthinkable. You just keep fighting tooth and nail to sort of maintain your piece of the pie.
Right. Exactly.
Sadly.
Yeah. And in those systems, if such allegations were tied to a governing party, the ripple effect would bring down the entire government. Why don't we hold ourselves accountable to the same standard in Papua New Guinea? I keep asking myself this question. We model our governance on Westminster systems. We say we admire Australia. But what our leaders get away with here in Papua New Guinea would never be accepted there. Why do we apply a different standard here in our country?
Our government is a Westminster-style government in name only. In name and structure only. In practice, it's something else entirely. It's a big man culture based on the collection of pigs, wealth, and sort of building yourself up as a big man. I wouldn't call it a Westminster system. In design, yes, but in practice, it's something else. I mean, the current Prime Minister calls it a Melanesian-style democracy. Okay, what's that? That's a style of democracy where, members of parliament are paid off regularly. What is it? You know what I mean? I shudder. I would compare us to the Fijians. The Fijians run a Westminster style, and they've got their own sort of twist on it, better than we do. And my take on it is because maybe the Fijians have a lot more integrity and dignity in their leadership than we do.
True. I mean, I've done a lot of work with Pacific Islanders and other Pacific countries through Miss Papua New Guinea. And yeah, one thing I've noticed is honor. Honor is a big thing. Right? You say something, you do it, and it's really based on their culture. Like, for example, in Tonga, it's taught very early, and because there's a kingdom, everybody follows the same rule to be honorable. And you're absolutely right. I think they do follow that very, very, straight down the line.
Yeah, it means a lot. Over here, honor has no value. Lipstick on a pig, that works better.
Well, we've chosen democracy, so why do we settle for less, again, I said, when it comes to integrity in the public life? And isn't it time we stop treating accountability like a foreign concept? Because we keep considering that we elect our prime minister based on the floor of parliament, right? Like we elect our leaders during elections who then go off and then elect our prime minister. Is it not time that we start electing our head of government directly, like a president, so that power is more accountable to the people and less tied to backroom numbers?
I guess the first thing, I mean, you look at the United States now with Donald Trump. He's trying to undermine the entire American system that's been built over 200 years, yeah? 200 plus years. It's the same thing in Papua New Guinea, except that we're doing it much faster than the US. I don't think the system is the problem. I don't think the design is the problem. Look, when the founding fathers, in my view, men with more wisdom than any of us today, when they chose democracy, look, Samare could have written the Constitution to say, I and my children will rule forever. He could have done that. He chose not to. And, this comes back to the deep wisdom of the man. And one of the things I found was that a lot of the people that wrote the Constitution and chose this type of government, many of them were Catholics, Dr. John Momis and him and his team. And many of them were actually educated at Wirui Seminary in Wewak. So our design, I learned later on, came from the Catholic Church's concept of social justice. And I thought, wow, okay. I mean, Samara himself once, in a discussion with me, I asked him, why did you choose democracy? And he said, son, we have more than 700 tribes. Democracy is the only thing that will work for us because it allows us consensus, coming by consensus. And so in the early design, and if you listen to John Momis, who's still alive today, who is the architect of the Constitution, our Constitution, he wanted participatory democracy from the community level up. So the thinking was spot on. I mean, when you sit down and listen to these guys, you're like, wow, okay, that makes sense. So there's nothing wrong with the design. It's just that people who came later realized that they could do whatever they wanted and get away with it. And so you've had this assault by members of parliament, by prime ministers on the construct itself consistently now over 15 or 16 years. So, those Papua New Guinean kids who were 5 years old at the time and are now 21, they don't know any different. They think that, this is how you're supposed to do it. So we're teaching the next generation of Papua New Guineans that you can operate outside of the system construct. Now, this is an agreed construct. You have to remember that. The Sepiks, the Morobians, the Eastern Highlanders, the Papuans, the New Guinea Islanders, they all agreed at the time that this was the best thing for all of us, right? This design. So, if you want to move to directly electing you can't directly elect a prime minister. You move to a presidential system. Again, if you choose that, then you need to change. It comes back to what I call your accountability mechanisms. Checks and balances. Checks and balances. This system is not working because we've thrown all the checks and balances out the window. That's why it's not working. So we can't blame the system. If you brought back all of the accountability mechanisms, this system would suddenly start working. Upholding, look, it's the duty of all members of parliament to uphold the integrity of parliament and to also support and maintain the accountability mechanisms that make it work. We're not doing that. Members of parliament have become project managers. I mean, the prime minister himself stands up and says, all of you need to go to your districts and work. I'm like, hang on. As members of parliament, our work is in parliament, not out there. We shouldn't be, look, 20 years ago, you had members of parliament, or 25 years ago, or 20 years ago. Now, you got project managers. The member of parliament might as well be the district manager. The governor might as well be the provincial administrator. And the prime minister himself reinforces that argument all the time. So we hold parliament sessions for 2 weeks, and they're like, oh, look, everyone has to go home and work. You need to go back and fix your districts. In my province, I have maybe 300 public servants, right?
That's a lot.
Now, this was in the original design. Every province has the same. This is in the original design. So it's not for me to go and make it work. My job should be to keep my public servants accountable. I am the final accountability mechanism for the people who elected me. I represent their voice in the accountability mechanism.
Exactly.
It should be, my job should, exactly. We're not doing that because the prime minister says, and he sends up probably in parliament and he accuses members of parliament regularly and he says, look, I've given you 10 million kina. What did you go and do with that money? What did you do in your district with the 10 million kina I gave you? Why are we even saying that? For me as a practice, I don't like this 10 million kina idea. Give the money to the public service, to the province. Let them manage it. Let me be the oversight mechanism, me and my members of the Provincial Assembly.
Right.
And that's how I've operated for the last 7 years, is to not even worry about the money. I worry about the accountability, because it's the accountability that makes sure the money has impact. Without the accountability, you're spending money in a vacuum,
Right.
which is what we've been doing.
Right.
And see the results. They're all around us. They speak for themselves.
Yeah, well, you definitely bring up a very good point there, because I wanted to ask that question because in PNG it's become painfully clear that the country is run by politics, not by policy, not even by development, not even by the people. It's a numbers game. Anything
No.
we can do to shift
No.
that over the next 15 years should really be on the table. And I want to circle back to ministries being matched to expertise. Why don't we have an upper house, as I was saying before? And wouldn't merit-based appointments to a second chamber work? And I ask this because ministers now, they're appointed from a very small pool of elected MPs. Right now, if you look at the pool of MPs that are in Parliament, as you were saying, when you match it to skill, regardless of whether they have the expertise in those portfolios that have been assigned to them. And this often leads to inadequate leadership in critical sectors like health, education, and infrastructure. Meanwhile, we have highly qualified Papua New Guineans, both at home and abroad, who have the training, experience, and insight to guide national development. And unfortunately, many of these individuals are unable to contribute meaningfully because they are outside of the political system. This disconnect contributes to an ongoing brain drain, and it undermines our national progress, I believe. And one of the many challenges we face, as I mentioned before, is the ongoing brain drain, because our highly educated population continues to leave Papua New Guinea in pursuit of better opportunities abroad. Can we blame them? No. These are individuals who are now helping build other nations while Papua New Guinea struggles to benefit from their expertise and leadership. We need to find ways to bring them back and engage them in shaping our country's development. Would you agree with this?
Totally. I agree with you. Look, in any organization, if you want to perform at your maximum best, you bring your best talent to focus on the issues, your best talent. In PNG, that doesn't happen. In fact, if you're talented, people don't like you. There's a lot of jealousy, and we've got to get rid of that woman, because she's too talented. She makes us all look bad. We don't celebrate talent enough, and we wonder why our best talent is leaving. Look, and again, I said it comes back to the Prime Minister. He's just too powerful. And put it this way, the best period of growth we've had is when Somare was in charge. Somare was a consultative Prime Minister. He didn't know everything, but he had a huge group of advisors, and he listened to the advice. So that's one of the problems when someone who's in charge thinks he knows everything.
Right.
And then he doesn't want to listen to advice. That gives you another problem. The reason we did well when the National Alliance government was in charge was that the brains trust in that organization. The brains, the Prime Minister right now, under his budget, I think the Treasurer is allowed to have about 10 advisors. It's budgeted for. And I think the Prime Minister is allowed to have about 10 advisors. Budgeted
Oh, wow, I did not know that.
right? Well,
Wow.
it's in the budget. So why aren't they making use of
Yes,
that?
exactly. I would like to know. Personally, I'd love to know, because there's a lot of my generation that I believe are extremely highly educated, and you cannot contribute at all to nation building at this time.
No. So, like for me, the first administrator I hired for Sepik was a Harvard graduate.
Wow.
Right.
Wow.
Dr. Clement Malau, brilliant man. I mean, and the government at the time tried to stop me from hiring him. Hello. I mean,
Why?
blew my mind. I'm like, guys, the guy has he's a graduate. He's got a PhD from Harvard, of all things, in management.
Blows my mind, really.
I mean, exactly. But fortunately, I got him. I had to outsmart these guys to get him. I think Dr. Malau is the first person to get appointed from a question on the floor of Parliament. I put the Prime Minister on the spot, and I got a text from the Minister while sitting in Parliament.
Wow.
Saying, look, send me a copy of his passport. We are appointing him now
Wow.
in Parliament. So it's crazy. How do you run a country when you can't bring your best people?
Yeah, I mean, I asked myself that because it's like I said, many from my generation, it's been 20 years since we graduated high school. And I can assure you that a lot of us, not me, but everyone I know that is really brilliant and all of that are engaged by corporate companies. Like you were saying, they're fast-tracked to develop and make money, billions and billions of dollars for other corporate companies and pay tax in other countries. And I mean, I say to myself, can we blame them? We really can't blame them at this point.
No. And look, at the end of the day, you got to look after yourself. You got to find a way to survive for you and your family.
Correct?
Yeah.
Correct.
That's the bottom line for everybody. And we've got to understand that. You can't just sort of play the patriot card on people who are struggling to pay the bills
Right.
or can't get a job.
Right.
Exactly. So in fact, I get contacted by a lot of Papua New Guineans who are working overseas, and they're like, Governor, do you think I should come back home? And I'm like, come back home to what? If you've got a nice job, if there's an organization looking after you in, Zimbabwe or wherever it is you're working, stay there. Don't come back here.
And isn't that sad,
There's
Governor?
like,
Isn't that sad? Like, yeah, that does
I
make
try to
me
be
sad.
honest. I try to be honest with people. I'm not very good with
I appreciate your honesty.
bull macau. You know what I mean? So I'm honest with people. I say to them, look, I'm really happy for you and your family because for me, I want to see people doing well. And if they can't do well here, I'm happy if they're doing well in Australia or New Zealand or Fiji or wherever. I mean, good for you. Good for you. I'm struggling to find work for my young people, and I'm trying to get them overseas. So, don't come here because I'm not going to give you that advice. You turn up here and then you're struggling and you're like, Governor Bird, you told me that I should
Right.
come. I'm going to take responsibility for that, especially when I know we're not creating the number of jobs, that we're not investing in the right places so that the jobs can be created for any of you. So I'm not going to lie to you.
Right. Exactly. Well, there we go. And we appreciate your honesty. I mean, I do. It's refreshing. So thank you. I think everyone watching this will take comfort now that their question has been answered.
Look. I remember there's some young people at university last year, and they walked up to me and they were saying, they're worried about. And I said to them, you are citizens of the world. You might be Papua New Guineans. I don't take that away from you, but you are citizens of the world.
I like that.
If you can get qualified enough to find work outside, I said, I can't change Papua New Guinea for you. I'm not going to lie to you and say that things are going to be better for you when you graduate, because I don't see it personally, right? When I sit down, I'm a strategic thinker, right? That's the way I operate. I'm a systems person. When I look at the systems and I look forward, I can already see the failure coming.
Right.
I'm not going to lie to you so that you hinge your entire future based on what I say to you. I want to tell you the truth. And the truth is, you don't have opportunities here, which is really, really sad. And I'm sad about it. I'm upset about it. But I can't do a thing about it. So I'm telling you, survival of the fittest. You look after yourself and your family. Number one priority. Because if there's a Papua New Guinean looking after himself or herself and her children, his children, somewhere in the world, hey, that's a great outcome for all of us. That's the way I see it.
That's a really refreshing view of it, to be honest with you. Because continuing on from our earlier discussion, other Westminster-style democracies like Australia, they have an upper house, which got me interested to think about it. Like, for example, in Australia, they call it the Senate, right? But here we could call it, the House of Chiefs, which functions as a reviewing chamber that incorporates expert input. So these people are not elected, they're rather chosen by all sides of the House. Do you think a second chamber in Papua New Guinea would offer a pathway to include professionals and specialists in not only policy leadership, but also in implementation that leads to tangible results? Would you support the creation of an upper house that ensures ministers are appointed based on merit and expertise and not political affiliation?
First, let me just say that an elected house is an elected house.
Right.
You have to get there by election. Okay. A Senate is an elected
Okay.
house. Now, these experts that you're talking about, there's a space for them. And that space is in the bureaucracy. Yeah, they should be in the bureaucracy because that's where policy is written. It's adopted by the elected representatives. The idea of an upper house, I was in the task force developing Vision 2050 in 2009. There was a separate task force run by the late Sir Barry Holloway, and I ended up contributing to that, and we proposed the idea of an upper
Oh, so you
house
did. You
in
did
2000.
propose it.
The design, the construct, it's all written. It's I forget the name of the document, but it's sitting there. It was never adopted. When we went to the conference in Leh, it was rejected. And the idea for that was that, remember we had the discussion around, and Dame Kidu was the one that championed it, around the election of women representatives? Yes. Special seats for women. Well, that was contained in this same. So the proposal was that you create an upper house. All the governors would sit in the upper house because governors essentially have we are elected like senators.
Okay.
If I was in another country, I'd be a senator.
Right. Okay.
So governors are elected because you're elected by the entire population. At one point, we were called regional members because we represented the region. So you've got the so the governors would sit in the upper house, And then you would have a special seat for women in all the provinces.
Okay.
So they would also sit in the upper house. So you'd have essentially 22 women and 22 governors
Right.
sitting in an upper house. And then there would be special appointment of certain members, like, say, a former chief justice, right, would qualify to be in this, a former police commissioner, a former brigadier of the army, a former chief ombudsman. So the constitutional office holders would qualify, and they would come in by appointment. They would not come in by election.
Yeah. That's the part I'm most interested in, is because,
Yes.
let's be real. If you can't get the numbers like that, if you're not in the current government, your chances of winning an election are like zero, right? Unless you have lots and lots of
The
money.
chances of winning an election in a corrupt
Yeah,
country with broken systems,
correct.
always going to be difficult. Yeah. So we had the design. The design's still
Okay,
there.
great.
It just depends. You got to have a prime minister. That's the problem. Our challenge is getting a prime minister that wants all of that. That's the challenge.
Yeah. Ooh, well, I'm actually a little relieved that this was brought up. So thank you to you and the team. At least we know it's written down somewhere, and maybe in the future it can be revisited, because I think many of us didn't understand the 22 appointments, right, of women. We just looked at it as, because I guess we didn't have the information, right, that there were 22 seats that were allocated to women, meaning they were not going to go through elections. They were not going to be. Whereas now you're explaining what it was about, which now makes me think, yeah, that would have been beneficial.
What happened at the time was that when the proposal was taken to the governors' conference in Leh, and the governors rejected it, basically because the women's seat was part of this proposal.
Okay.
The reserved seats for women. Now, when it failed, the United Nations decided to just run with the women's seats.
Right.
The problem is, which chamber would they sit in? In our design, we already had a chamber set up for them.
Right.
And this is where it also collapsed when it went to Parliament, because the parliamentarians were like, hang on, we struggled to get here, so you should struggle the same way. There's no special treatment.
Exactly.
And of course, we anticipated that when we did our design, because that was a huge consultation around the country led by, say, Barry Holloway. And, there was a call for women's seats, and we were like, okay, where do we put them? So the obvious answer was the upper house. You know? And so that was the design. But like I said, when the whole thing collapsed, the UN, and of course, they went through Dame Kidu at the time, and they tried to run just the 22 seats. And when they did that, most people didn't understand, well, where did this idea come from?
I was one of those people, right? I was kind of thinking, okay, but that's really unfair for someone who goes and expends the money and goes, through the whole election process. So I didn't understand it. Yeah, but now you explain it, and I'm like, oh yeah, like I'm all for having a second chamber because of the expertise and the knowledge that we lack, with all due respect, on the floor of Parliament.
Sepik Governor was our chairman at the time, and he was deputy prime minister. And you hear Sepik sometimes come out on the floor, and he's advocating for these things because he knows the original design that we did. And I was involved in the original design.
Oh, well, there you go. Thank you for confirming that, Governor. I wanted to move on now to a fairly recent incident, which included the shutdown of Facebook. So that recent decision to shut down Facebook, it raised deep concerns about free speech and access to information. What's your perspective on this move, and what does it suggest about PNG's democratic direction? I ask because you are very vocal on Facebook, and you disseminate information to us, which we love. We like to know what's going on. We like our questions answered when others don't want to answer them, or when we feel ignored. What was your reaction to the Facebook shutdown, and why is this dangerous in a democracy? What does it say about transparency?
Look, members of parliament, once they know they're doing the wrong thing, they want to shut down criticism. I mean, that's basically a trend worldwide, not just in Papua New Guinea. It's a human trend, yeah? So in Papua New Guinea, you've got a very unpopular government already. Right. They know it. They know they're unpopular. So, but they don't care. They just want to keep. And remember, I said earlier that when members of parliament get elected, the people lose control of the member of parliament the minute he gets sworn in. So he runs rogue. He does whatever. If he wants to do the right thing, he does the right thing. If he doesn't want to do the right thing, he doesn't have to. So there's no accountability mechanism once the member gets elected. The people lose control. And that's the importance of mechanisms like Facebook. Facebook is an accountability mechanism. You get some people use it for stupid things. That's a given. And we should manage that. We should come up with laws that manage everyone that abuses whatever public mechanism. We have laws for murderers, rapists, and all these sorts of people. Yeah. We should have laws for people who abuse Facebook.
Right.
We haven't brought any yet. And not just Facebook. Other countries have done it. Papua New Guinea? No, we're not. We haven't. What's our solution? Ban it.
I couldn't believe it. And the thing is, everyone was in uproar about it.
Did I mention Tucker Box earlier on? Did you hear me
It's
say
written
that?
in my notes, Governor. I've got it here.
Okay. Look, I get criticized a lot on Facebook. Someone got my face and superimposed it on a really fat lady with big, breasts and
Wow.
everything else, and they were like, "Oh, this is Governor Bird," and big lipstick and everything, and I'm like, mate, I can still bench press 140 kilos, and I'm not a young man, so I didn't mind. I didn't mind that someone did a. I laughed. I laughed at it because, mate, you want me to take off my shirt?
But you gotta have thick skin, right? You'd think in politics you have thick skin because, like you said, social media has become an accountability platform, not just in Papua New Guinea, all
Absolutely.
over the world.
Absolutely.
And
All over the
we
world.
need it. I mean, we need to know what's going on. We need to make informed decisions. We want to have a one-on-one contact with our leaders. We don't want this to be a whole separate thing where, our leaders become completely unreachable. And I'm going to touch on that shortly. But I do, I was very shocked by it. So I wanted to know how you felt about that.
Look, I came out with a post or something where I said, when all accountability mechanisms fail, that's when the people must step in.
Yeah.
I said that a while back, and Peter Siamelili and other MPs were really pissed off. They're like, "No, you're going to come challenge us on the floor." Yeah, but you control the floor, Parliament floor. You don't control the
Correct.
people. Okay. And funny enough, just the other day, Bruce Springsteen in America said the same thing I said.
Yeah, he did.
So I'm like, wow, I've always loved Bruce Springsteen and, born in the USA and all of that. And like, wow. And he said the same thing. He works because of universal principles, like accountability to the people. When all accountability mechanisms fails, like in Papua New Guinea, all our accountability mechanisms are non-existent. Parliament cannot hold the Prime Minister accountable. So when that fails, the final accountability is the people. Where do the people go? The people go to Facebook. That's the final accountability mechanism. I did a post that said, Facebook is the people's parliament. I did a post like
I did see
and
that.
like
I did see that actually.
10,000 Papua New Guineans loved it.
I was one of those 10,000 because I was like, actually, that's so right. Because, we do watch parliament sessions and we do watch the chat and I love that people get so involved. And I'm just like, if only the leaders read what we're writing, wouldn't that be nice?
90 people control the country right now. 90 members of parliament.
And what's our population? Oh, that's right.
what
We
the
didn't have a
public
census.
thinks.
We don't even know our population. That's right. Yeah.
So I'm like, well, in a democracy, the people rule. Just because you were elected through a faulty electoral process, some of them got elected by marking the ballot papers themselves. Some of them got elected by sticking guns in the face of the electoral officials. I didn't do that. So not all of us were elected the same way. I respect my people. I respect my voters. If my voters turn around tomorrow and said, look, Governor Bird, we want you to leave, I'd leave. Because I represent them. And if I no longer enjoy their confidence, I should respect their views.
Yeah. Well, that's the honorable part, right, of the title.
Democracy doesn't work unless you have honor and accountability and all those things with it.
Right.
Otherwise, you might as well be, Kim Jong-un.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And as we're talking on that, one thing that continues to affect governance is the lack of civic education around what elected leadership is truly meant to be, right? Many of our people see MPs as chiefs or overlords, not just public servants elected to represent them. Do you think we need to change the way we engage with our elected leaders? Do you think the whole red carpet treatment, the bowing down, the public worship of politicians needs to stop? And I'm not saying that we stop respecting our leaders. No, respect is a beautiful part of our culture, but our leaders are not above us. They are elected to serve us and help us. They are accountable to us as the people who vote, not the other way around. And if you're a Christian, no one is above God. This big man mentality that we see day in, day out, do you think it's partly to blame for the governance issues that we see?
Look, I've seen members of parliament get elected and they're practically floating. They're living in a different stratosphere. And I've seen them become ministers and they become even worse. You need a rope to sort of tie them back to earth. They're floating away. So look, I agree totally with everything you're saying. For me, when I go home, I always like to go and engage with my people because they remind me that I'm their voice. And a lot of members of parliament are like, oh, you talk too much. I'm like, mate, have you met a Sepik woman?
Hey, sorry, I have lots of Sepik friends. Shout out Antonia Singwood.
Exactly. Antonia is my
Oh, is
niece,
she?
by the way.
She's one of
distantly,
my
yeah.
best friends, yeah.
So, like, and I'm born of a Sepik
Yeah.
woman. I grew up with Sepik women having some of the loudest mouths you've ever come across, So
Gotta respect
my
it. Gotta
Sepik women
respect
are
it.
louder than me, so I represent that electorate. Like, if something is wrong, they come up to me straight away and they're like, Governor, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. And I'm standing there listening to Sepik women. Like, I represent that electorate. I went to Leh one time, and the road from Nadzab to Leh was really bad, and you sort of bounce all the way in, and by the time you get there, your backbone is almost dislocated, and you're like,
Yeah.
oh my God. And we get a couple of potholes in Wewak, and oh my God, people are ripping my head off. Now in Leh, the people of Morobe, for 12 years, 15 years, they had this really bad road. They never complained. They were just like, oh, it's okay, we just.
Wow.
You get a few potholes in ESP and the governor's head gets ripped off. You look at now, every province in Papua New Guinea is having power problems. Who's complaining? The Sepik people are complaining. They have a right to complain.
We're gonna be more like
Just because
them. We're gonna be more like them, really. Yeah.
the people in Alatau, they have no power, but they don't complain.
We have to be more like the Sepik women. We need to speak up. We need to be bold, because
I totally respect that my Sepik women speak up like
I
that.
do too.
And I'm glad that they do, because they keep me accountable.
Yeah, and didn't you say that earlier? Isn't that what's missing? That accountability line. Yeah,
Agreed.
yeah. And, I say it's a concern because when you're elected in your electorate, that big man mentality carries into Port Moresby, right? They bring like almost a superiority complex with them. They're too proud to ask for help. They don't want to seek expert advice, or they don't want to admit that they don't know something. And that pride can really stall development. Do you think a dose of humility could help us govern better?
Look, absolutely. Look, humility is not just. It's not just about you saying you want to be humble. You've got to actually do it. Like, I had the unique perspective of watching, Bernard Narakobi, the late Bernard Narakobi, Grand Chief Sir Michael. I had the opportunity to watch them interact with the electorate, the Sepik electorate. I watched them, and I saw people scream and shout and yell at them, disagreeing with them. And I saw these two great men just sit there and smile and take it. And I thought, wow,
That is humility.
I go home and my people scream and shout and yell and disagree with me. And, I'm a Sepik, and these are the two Sepik leaders that I've watched operate. And I try to emulate that as much as possible. Look, I will never ever say that I'm anywhere near the leagues that these two great men were in, but I was fortunate to watch them operate, and I try to adopt the things that they did as much as I can, because I watched Tamari get really criticized in a couple of elections that I ran against him, and I was like, my God, I'm gonna win. That people hate this guy, like, look at the way they're criticizing him. But his response was always, he took the criticism and he accepted it, and they respected him for it. And he beat me. So I'm like, wow. So that taught me something. I was like, okay. I was criticized really badly leading up to the 2022 elections. And I was worried. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to lose the elections. Look at the way people are criticizing me. It's scary. I'm like, my work isn't finished. My cocoa work, my baby, it's not finished. And they're going to kick me out. And so, but guess what? I won. I'm the first person in East Sepik and Medang to win with an absolute majority under the system.
Wow.
The only other person that did it was in 1972 when Sir Michael was elected unopposed.
Wow.
Basically, nobody nominated against him in 72. So that humbled me, and it taught me a lot. Like, my electorate, they'll criticize me and I listen. And if I follow the same thing that Somari did, which is to listen and to take the criticism, they respect you for it, and they'll elect you back. Most of my colleagues, they can't handle that. They can't handle the criticism. And like I said, I wouldn't have done it myself if I hadn't seen how it works. And that's part of the job. You represent those people,
Right.
And they're going to disagree with you at some point. The population of ECP is like, I don't know, close to like 600,000-700,000 people now.
Wow.
Not everyone is going to agree with you.
Yeah.
I mean, we're bigger than bigger than Fiji now.
Wow.
So you've got to learn to take on board all of that, that's just, and I think every other member of parliament needs to learn to see it for what it is and its usefulness.
Right. We've got one topic before we wrap up. So we're doing really well. This is probably the last big topic and then we can wrap up. But I wanted to touch on something powerful. Papua New Guinea shouldn't be ashamed of where we are in our development journey. Countries like Singapore, UAE, and Qatar got their independence around the same time as us. They faced similar challenges. Their early leaders weren't highly educated, but they had a plan. They invested in education. They welcomed foreign expertise with one goal: to develop their people. What they didn't do is keep foreign consultants in the system for 40 years without succession. In PNG, we need to start thinking, what's your exit plan? How many Papua New Guineans have you trained? Have you left behind capacity? And if we're always seen as a little brother, like to partners like Australia, with all due respect, do we really expect to grow to an equal?
Look, my response to that is that having been in the government system now for the last 7 years, and I used to work as a consultant paid for by the Australian government as a development consultant for, I think, almost 5 years before that, 5 or 6 years. And I worked for the PNG government as well as a consultant. I have not seen all these so-called foreign advisors, to be honest with you. No, I haven't. In fact, I don't see the problem with having foreign advisors if they're really good. The greatest reformist in our country was Sepik Governor. Sepik, when he became prime minister, he went and picked up some of the best foreign advisors in their field. They gave him recommendations, and he used those recommendations to change Papua New Guinea.
Right.
And those changes are still benefiting Papua New Guinea today.
Yeah.
For me, I think Papua New Guinean members of parliament don't take advice from anyone. From anyone. Doesn't matter whether you're foreigner or if you're local, it's even worse. They don't even want to talk to you. The way I would do something is that if I had 5 advisors, which I don't have an advisor right now. My only advisor is Samson Torobi, who is the provincial administrator of ESP. Okay, I don't have any other advisors. I can't afford them. My budget doesn't allow me, and so I do most of the thinking myself. I shouldn't have to, in my view.
Right.
Personally, I think that we should have a budget that allows us to get advisors, because and these shouldn't be just jobs for the boys. You should, like Prime Minister James Marape, who is his economic advisor?
Right.
If he doesn't have one, he should have one, right? And whatever other expertise, like state-owned enterprises. We need to reform state-owned enterprises and fix it and make it do the work it's supposed to do for Papua New Guinea. Who are the advisors there?
Yeah. No, you bring up a very good point, because it's always circled in the mainstream media, and I guess it's what information is passed on and to whom, that there is quite a lot of advisors that have been in country for a very long time. And I guess the concern is, okay, if we're not seeing results, then is it time to switch up?
Well, who are those advisors? I haven't seen any.
I personally don't know any of them, to be quite honest with you.
I've done work in the Prime Minister's department. I didn't see any foreign advisors there, and this was when Peter O'Neill was the Prime Minister. I've done work in Treasury. There were a couple of Australian from the Australian Tax Office or from Treasury, and they were seconded to help us, so paid by Australia, sent here to fill in capacity gaps. They were not advisors; they were actually doing inline work. I've done capacity work in the Internal Revenue, which is the tax office. Didn't see any advisors there. I've done capacity work in the Department of Finance. There were no foreign advisors there.
Wow.
And I was attached as an advisor in planning, myself and Professor Misty Baloloi, when Charlie Abel was the minister. And I was there for 3 years. The only advisors there were myself and Misty Baloloi. We both
and I'm all for that consultation, right? I'm all for that. I just want to make that clear. I just think that when we're for it, we also should, like yourself, you and other Papua New Guineans, we also are in that space where we can offer that advice, especially like you said, your advisor who has a Harvard degree. I mean, are we maximizing that knowledge?
We're not. I don't think we're using advisors
Yeah,
enough. I mean, like
exactly.
in the case where, uh, like with Charlie, when Charlie was the planning minister, and he actually went to the Australian government for support. He said, "Look, I need support. Can you guys help me?" But he said, "But I can't afford to pay for them." So the Australian government advertised, and I was one of those advisors they offered to Charlie. And when Charlie saw me, he was like, "How come the Australians are offering you?" And I'm like, "Well."
Why aren't you offering your
So
services for free?
he was expecting an Australian,
Right.
I guess.
Yeah.
So we joke about it even today. We're good friends. And so once I got in, and then Charlie was like, "Look, can you find some other people? I need some more people." And I brought
Right.
Misty, Professor Misty Balole, and and Charlie was pleasantly surprised that. And I brought another guy called Ricky Kumo. Now Ricky is still working for the Australians. Ricky is from
Okay.
Medang. And Charlie looked at all these, and there was another guy, Dr. George Bobby. Dr. George Bobby is now working with, I think, the World
Oh,
Bank or
wow.
something. And Dr. George Bobby is from Western Highlands. So I brought all these people in, and Charlie looked at them and goes, "Wow, these are Papua New
This
Guineans."
is my
And I'm like,
point.
"Yeah."
I will acknowledge that there are some skills that we just don't have in country, right? Some very high
Oh,
skilled
look,
expertise, which we
absolutely.
should be
But
reaching out. But there are the skills
look,
that some of the skills that we need that are very present in the country, just not utilized.
look, there are some brilliant Papua New Guineans here. Dr. Clement Waine, Dr. Eric Omoru, Dr. Mio Komlong. I mean, these are people that I have worked with in my life, like brilliant Papua New Guineans. So when you talk about foreign advisors, trust me, in my last, since about 2009 to now, that's what, 16 years that I've been involved in, public work, working with different government departments and everything. I haven't seen these long-term foreign advisors that people keep talking
Right.
about. I've worked with brilliant Papua New Guineans. Some of them are just, Professor Chalapan Kaluwin is another one. Professor David Kavanamor, who's now with,
It
Professor
must
Mela.
be something of before that keeps circling around, right? Based on what you're telling me. I mean,
I
I'm
think
just
I think
asking the
I
facts. I
think
just
people
want the
with no
facts.
knowledge of the space, and people with no knowledge of the space simply assume that it's foreigners.
Right.
Look, I have not seen, and even now, like the UN, the UN does work in Papua New Guinea as an aid organization. The UN employs a lot of highly qualified Papua New Guineans to do that work,
Right.
right? If you go to DFAT, the Australian Foreign Affairs thing, yeah, they have Australian diplomats and other experts here, but a lot of the experts are Papua New Guinean. They're Papua New Guinean men and women, highly qualified, who are paid for by the Australian government that do work for us. So I circle back to that point. I think my assessment, 7 years of being a member of parliament, is that members of parliament, particularly those who are in charge, the National Executive Council, they don't take advice from anyone, whether you're local or foreign. They basically work doing the things that they think Papua New Guinea needs. If they used smart advisors, and I say it again, I don't really care whether those advisors are foreign or those advisors are Papua New Guinean. Leaders of Papua New Guinea, like any other country, need good advice. And I come back to the point I made about Semekere. Semekere went and got some of the most, I forget their names off the top of my head, but he went and got some excellent foreign advisors who gave him the advice. I mean, I asked Semek, I was like, Semek, I'm a very close friend of Semekere. I used to go to his house every weekend for tea. I loved the man, like he was brilliant. And so I used to say to him, Semek, how did you come up with all these ideas on how to restructure Papua New Guinea? He said, I got advisors. And when they gave me the advice, I took the advice. I was like, wow.
Exactly.
It blew me away.
I mean,
It blew me away.
Yeah, it's dumbfounding to me that that's something that's not utilized, because as you said, we need it, foreign or not. If you have the expertise in a particular industry, we should be able to use that knowledge and pass it on, right, for the country.
You look at PNG LNG, all right? Arthur Somare drove it, and Arthur's my good friend. I sat with Arthur, and I was like, Arthur, how did you do it? He was like, mate, I had a team of advisors from all over the world.
Exactly.
Now, Arthur did it. When I asked Grand Chief Somare, I was like, how did you guys do the LNG thing? And he was like, I don't know anything about LNG. So I said to Arthur and Patrick and Moyabe, I was like, you guys go and You work it out. Patrick writes, you guys go work it out and come tell me. So they came and told Grand Chief, and Grand Chief was like, okay, let's do it.
Yeah.
He took the advice too.
Yeah.
So like every time Papua New Guinea did well, in my view, the leaders then took
Yep.
advice from the best people you could find.
Absolutely. I agree 100%, if not 200% with that comment. Because, you know, we are a resource-rich country. Singapore has no natural resources. UAE is a desert, and yet they've invested in their people, their systems, and a long-term vision. We can't really use the excuse anymore of, oh, we're only 50 years old. Singapore is 60, UAE is 53. We had a head start with more natural advantages than most. So what has held us back? We come back to the same questions, the same answers. Governor, what are your thoughts on this comparison? What do you think explains the pace of our development, and where do we go from here?
For me, I think it's just bad investments.
Bad investment.
We haven't done, like, for example, in the last 6 years, this government has had the benefit of about 150 billion kina in revenues. 150 billion
Yes.
kina.
My goodness.
Name one strategic thing that they've invested in.
You can't even walk down the street and say that we've made 150 billion
No.
kina.
It comes back to the principle of strategic thinking. What is strategic thinking about? Strategic thinking is about finding the things that are your strengths and developing those in order to get the outcomes that you need. All right. Now, you've seen the work that I've done in Congo.
Yes.
You've probably been
Yes,
following.
we commend you for that. It's amazing.
I was just being strategic. We didn't have the money, but what did we have? We had people who were able to work. We had people that owned their own land. What did those people lack? They lacked skills and
Right.
knowledge, and they lacked planting material. So what did I do? I supplied the skills and the planting material, the improved planting material, and they provided the labor and the land. Look at the results now. That's being strategic.
And it's about empowering people to use what they've got and develop them further, as opposed to just giving a handout and then keeping them in the same space forever.
It's about using people's
Yes.
talent to get an outcome.
Yes.
That's what it's
Yes.
about. So Papua New Guinea has missed that opportunity because we've never been strategic. Like when Somare went after the PNG LNG project, he was being strategic. And I commend him for that. I think that was brilliant. But since Somare until now, have we done anything strategic? The simple answer is no. And so at some point, if we did strategic things, we wrote a document for Charlie Abel called the National Strategy for Responsible Sustainable Development. And I think it's a brilliant document. Everything I've done in ECP since I've become governor is basically out of that
Wow.
document because I helped write it, and so if I write something into a policy, it stands to reason that I should believe it and try to actually
Right.
do it. So I did. I was also involved in a study with the National Agriculture Research Institutions where we wrote a book called Agriculture for Development. And now we did that in 2010.
Okay.
So a lot of the things that are in that book, I've done in ECP. So like, I think I helped write a chapter in it. So if I'm going to come and write a policy which I believe in, then it stands to reason that I should actually go and try to make it
Right.
work. Yeah.
Right.
So, as an example, these are two examples I'm giving you. So, I think if Papua New Guinea does strategic things, it will recover.
Okay.
If we continue to do things that are not based on data, that are not based on properly peer-reviewed studies by experts, look at all the stuff we're doing. Connect PNG. I mean, where did the data come from? Who wrote it? Is it available for us
Right.
to see? We're spending 1.9 billion kina a year on that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm from Abao. My late mum is from Abao, so Sepuka Temu is our member, and yeah, I mean, I'd love Connect PNG to go there. We still have to divide our trips, sometimes 8 hours, sometimes 5 hours. I mean, since I was 12 years old, so
And Abao, for example, I would connect Abao to Port Moresby. Why?
Yeah.
Because you can produce good food in
Yeah.
Abao that you can supply to Port Moresby.
Yeah.
So why isn't Abao connected to Port Moresby? Why are we trying to connect Southern Highlands to Port Moresby? It makes no sense.
yeah,
to
and
me.
that's the same
What are
question
you
my
going to
people
bring
ask
from
from
Southern-
Abao. It's sad because, they have to bring their crops to Moresby and the PMV gets stuck and then they overnight in the village, or you go to another village and
Look,
then catch a dinghy and then walk. And, we're still doing that in 2025.
Port Moresby is the largest economy in the South
Correct.
Pacific,
Yes.
right? Now, wouldn't you want to connect the production areas in the nearest province, which is Central Province, connect Central Province to NCT so that the people in Central Province can produce food and bring the cost of food in Port Moresby down, nutritious food so the kids in Port Moresby are eating healthy foods and developing nicely, all these things.
Yeah.
We haven't done that. So again, it illustrates my point about being strategic in your investments.
Well,
How should Connect PNG work in ECP? I have a highway that is about 400 kilometers long that goes from Wewak to Nuku in West Sepik. Okay, that same road goes down to Pagui. It goes to through Maprik, Yangru Sausea. All right, that road is falling apart now. There's not a single toya of Connect PNG spent on that road. I have cocoa that's sitting in Nuku and Lumi that needs to get to the
oh,
wharf.
wow.
I drove on that road last week. It's falling apart, right? I struggled. I have a road that goes to Engoram that got washed out last week, right? There's not a single money, and Engoram is going to be the largest production area for cocoa,
Wow.
perhaps in the country. That's how much we've invested there. Not one toya of Connect PNG money is spent on that road. Now, what do I need as a Sepik from the greater Sepik region? I need all my production areas connected to the wharf, either in Wewak or in
Right.
Wanemo. That's what I
Right.
need. I don't need ECPIC to be connected to Medang or connected to Enga. I don't need any
Right.
of that. If you connect all my producers to the port, they are going to make money, look after themselves, and you can forget
Right.
about it.
Well,
But
they would
no,
pay tax, and then that
Connect PNG is
tax
not doing
money
any
would
of that.
then go to, the greater development of the nation. I would think that would be the logical, progression. But
The only logical thing we do in Papua New Guinea is political logic,
yeah,
loyalty
yeah,
logic, Melanesian
yeah.
logic, whatever that is. We don't do logic in terms of what the rest of the world sees as logic. We do our own standard of logic,
Yeah, you said
unfortunately.
it, Governor. And what you said before about nutrition, it brings me to our final point, is about our overall development as a driver, right? Because we have to rethink development. Why aren't we using the Human Development Index, HDI, as a benchmark for development? So Papua New Guinea's development is not just about roads or resource projects. When we look at HDI, we look at health, education, and income. Are we using the right measures? Many of us feel that Papua New Guinea is, we treat development as something vague or arbitrary, but it's not. The UN's HDI offers a clear path, and countries that are moving from developing to developed have been using it as a compass. So we can break that down further. When we look at health, we look at life expectancy and access. Are we serious about improving life expectancy and access to quality healthcare? Are we building roads that lead to clinics and hospitals, or just for the sake of cutting a ribbon? We look at education. We look at literacy and learning outcomes. What's the real state of our education system? How is it possible that in 2025, over 50% of our grade 5 students cannot read at grade 5 level? Why are we continuing to fund failing schools without any kind of radical reform? When we look at income and opportunity, we look at economic empowerment. Have our major resource projects like PNG LNG really lifted our people? Many banks and super funds say they didn't even benefit from the first train. So with Papua LNG, Pinyang, and others on the horizon, what's the plan to ensure that ordinary Papua New Guineans actually see tangible benefits this time? When you look at infrastructure with purpose, we're looking at how are we linking this to HDI? Are we building roads that connect people to schools, etc.? Or are we just pouring bitumen for show? What is the national strategy that links infrastructure to human development? Governor Bird, what are your thoughts on what truly is required for PNG to develop and for us to see at the core, right? Shouldn't the HDI, not politics, not image, be our national benchmark? Because without a healthy, educated, and economically active population, we cannot have real development. Do you agree?
Look, I've been smiling the whole time because I was thinking to myself, I don't have to answer that.
Sorry, it
Because you
should have
said
been a
everything.
question. I just want to remind the audience, this is Coffee with Lewa, right? This is a conversation. So before you come for me in the comments, I'm participating in this conversation.
Well, look, they're not going to sack you from your job for starters. So we can talk about. Look, you're right. You're absolutely right. I agree with you 100%. These are the same things. You might as well be in parliament instead of me because uh, these are the things I say in parliament, and my colleagues are looking at me like, what? Like,
Yeah, we hear you. We're screaming at the TV where, we're like, yes, yes, say
yeah.
it, Governor Bird, say it. And then, we go back to reality in the next few days and we're like, oh, what's happening? But I mean, I said quite a lot, sorry, a mouthful. Is there anything that you'd like to add to that?
Look, first of all, I agree with you. When we were developing Vision 2050, we used HDI as the measure. There was a reason we selected that, all the reasons that you just said. So, look, I don't disagree with you. Look, what other things am I attacking in ECP? Going after purchasing power parity.
Right.
That's part of HDI.
It is, yeah.
We're improving our schools. When I became governor, none of the East Sepik schools were in the top 10. I have 3 schools in the top 10
Wow.
in 7 years.
Wow, congratulations.
The greatest work I've done in East Sepik is around health. I started with the main hospital in Wewak, and then we've got a district hospital, we've got a polyclinic, and I just opened last week, was it Friday? I opened a village health.
Wow. Yes, I saw the pictures. Beautiful. Beautiful.
Exactly.
And the people got really involved
So
with it. They put up their own money and
I've got amazing
yeah.
people. I've got amazing people,
So,
which is why I fight so hard for them, because I feel that that's the least I can do. So all those 3 things that I'm attacking or working on are all HDI. They're HDI measures. So like, I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree with you. I just there are many times when I sit in parliament and I think, oh my God,
what's happening?
what am I doing here? I don't fit in. I'm,
Actually, there was one moment where we saw just like, I think you were just like this, and then like your chair swung, and I looked at my husband and he was just like that. And honestly, I was like, I think we should turn this off because our blood pressure must be through the roof.
Look, most of my good friends, they're all professors and they have PhDs and I actually have find greater comfort talking to them and having conversations with them, like I'm doing with you. I work very well with intelligent people. Let me say that. I
Well,
struggle,
you are intelligent yourself.
and I try to be patient. So like, I wish that our members of parliament would humble themselves and admit, first of all, the difficulty we're in, number one. So admit that. And then let's be honest about the solutions. Personally, I think we have enough money. We have enough money right now. We don't need to borrow, for starters. We should use the money that we have now for greater impact, for greater value, and for greater impact. That's what I believe. And these are things that I've been arguing for since I got into parliament. They're not new things. And based on my assessment in the last 7 years, I think we've done a poor job. When I say we, I mean all governments, both governments that have existed during the time I've been in parliament. And I think we can do better. We should do better, but we're not. And to be quite honest, I don't know how to solve that problem. I keep telling to my colleagues, we need a hard reset. We need to change, realign our systems and do things properly, do it differently. If you want a different outcome, you need to do it differently. And that's what Einstein said. And I totally agree with that. And so far we're not. We're just going down the same road, doing the same old things we've done for 50 years, and we're expecting different results. It's not going to happen. So until we get better government, smarter government, we're just going to have to be patient, I guess, because this is our country. Where are we going to go? I mean, I can go run a business somewhere else, but I've got relatives here and friends who are going to do it tough. So
Yeah. I think we're on the
we just have to keep
same
fighting
mindset.
and keep hoping. And we can't give up.
No, and
It's
people
not
tell me
an
that all the time, like, okay, you should go do this, or you stay where you are, or, enjoy the benefits of, enjoy the blessings, all these things. And I find myself I feel guilty when I enjoy a simple pleasure, a luxury of life. When I have nephews and nieces still having to walk 2 hours to get to school, and I always hear this, our parents went through hardship. Both my parents walked hours just to get to school, and they were incredibly blessed to have parents who believed in education. And so my thing is, they walked all those hours to get to school, but they educated us so that we wouldn't have to do the same, right? Just because our parents went through a hard time and our grandparents went, no, they did it because they wanted us to have a better now, a better future. And so that's what keeps me, caring more than most, I think. But that brings me to our final question as we wrap up. Governor, 50 years on, if we had to give Papua New Guinea a development grade, pass or fail, what would it be? What's your honest assessment? Let's close with a visionary note. What is your vision for Papua New Guinea? Can you paint a picture for the next 10 years? I invite you to inspire with some practical, achievable goals.
Well, if I was to assess us now, we'd be below average for sure. That's what I'd say. I think certainly the future that I see, and it's something we're doing in ECP, is that a lot of our people want to have a decent opportunity, an equal opportunity, and so that they can live the lives they want for themselves and their kids.
Right.
And that's what we're working for, and that's what we should work for.
Governor, thank you again for your